So you can actually use the seat.
Okay, that's fine.
So there's no need to swap.
Okay.
So when anyone interject to add on,
Okay, that's
you're
nice.
welcome to. You'll just obviously switch on the mic and switch it off again when you're not speaking. Is there anything from my side you would need?
I just
Do you
want
have
to.
your printouts?
Yes, I just want to thank you.
I did not print out anything.
So there's no delegate. There's only one. Ombudsman.
Yeah, so the other one's gonna sit there.
Sure.
No problem. You make copies.
So you can take the lapel out then.
I just don't know whether
Although, why don't you just leave the lapel there? Because tomorrow or the next day when they come in, it's yeah. It's plugged in, hey?
But then normally only one comes.
Yeah, and then I have a problem like yesterday where I've got two of them sitting there.
Yeah.
And I can't get audio from this guy because the mic is over there. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just never know.
Yeah, but you have the chance.
Yeah.
And then, exactly. Yeah. And then there's the enemies to see that you might not be able to speak. So, I wanted to say, I only just want to print out the cap round allocation that everyone spoke about so that you can have it. Okay, let's put this. You also have your own copy, right?
Yes, I do.
Thanks so much, Adrian.
No problem.
Mornings.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Oh, we're very good, thank you.
So, let me also bring this. Is it possible to have
Right. It looks like we have got a number of people who are going to be testifying. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Who do we have on the screen there? Is that you? No.
No, you've got Mr. Bruce Forbes, who's a member of the
Yes, yes,
Thank you.
yeah. Advocate Mele, in what order are we going to be hearing today?
No problem. Mr. Adrian Lansberg, can you kindly advise us in what order you will be testifying?
Yeah, if it's okay with my colleagues and through you, Chairman, I'm happy to go first, and then I think between Mr. Moaki and Mr. Forbes, I think Mr. President would want to go last. Am I correct, President?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Lansberg, that's correct.
Okay. And the gentleman on the screen?
Mr. Forbes would then go after me.
Yes. So let's do this. Let's swear all of you in whatever way you would like to be sworn in. So the person who is going to be testifying first is you.
Mr. Adrian Lansberg.
Yeah. Give your full names for the record, please.
Adrian Bernard Lansberg.
Adrian Bernard Lansberg. Adrian Bernard Lansberg, do you swear that the evidence you are going to give to us is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me God.
You have been sworn in, Mr. Lansberg. And yeah, I have here a communication from Easterns on behalf of the Eastern Cricket Board of Directors. I don't know if that is from you, but it really does not matter now. I would like to get a sense, but let me swear in everybody else who is going to be testifying so that I don't at every point say to you, or who is going to come after you, Mr. Lansberg?
Mr. Forbes, Chair.
Mr. Forbes. Mr. Forbes, will you give me your full names, please, for the record? Mr. Forbes. Can Mr. Forbes hear me?
I think we are on mute.
Mr. Forbes, I don't know if you have been hearing me. It looks like...
No, you've been muted. You have been muted.
Yes, I apologize for that. What has been happening is I have been establishing who is going to be testifying on behalf of Easterns. And I believe that 3 of you are going to be doing so. I've just sworn in Adrian, and I would like to swear you in. But first of all, let me just establish, do you have any objection to taking the oath, or do you affirm? What will you do?
I will affirm, sir.
What are your full names for the record?
Bruce John Granard Forbes.
Mr. Forbes, do you affirm that the evidence that you are going to give to this inquiry is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth. If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, I so affirm.
I so affirm.
Thank you. You have been affirmed in. Now the last one. Give your full names for the record, please.
Tato Jacob Moaki.
Tato Jacob Moaki. Tato Jacob Moaki.
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 Yeah.
Yes. Are you going to take the oath or are you going to affirm?
I'm going to take an oath.
That being so, I will swear you in so that when the time comes for you to do your bid, we will have dispensed with this formality. Tato Jacob Moaki, do you swear that the evidence you will give to this inquiry will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing else but the truth? If that is so, please raise your right hand and say, so help me God.
So help me God.
All three of you gentlemen have been sworn in, and we will follow the order in which you were sworn in dealing with you dealing with the responses to allegations that were made against you or about you, or which may be interpreted to have been made in a way that is detrimental to your interests in your various capacity in the Eastern cricket structure that you represent. It seems to me that you will be responding to some of the submissions that were made by Mr. Siopa. That is the gentleman who testified yesterday. Yes. And, but to any allegations that you would want to respond to that may have been put before me by those who have testified in June, July, August, where before we had an adjournment. So if I may call on you, Adrian, to say your piece, how do you want to respond, and how do you intend to structure your evidence?
Thank you, Chair. I will go through it systematically. So I will deal with it exactly as the gentleman appeared before you.
Yes.
So if I've got it correct, I think it was first Mr. Moloko, Mr. Degema, I'm not sure which one went first. Then I'll obviously deal with those two gentlemen first.
Yes.
And then with your permission, Chair, I would like to then deal with the one of yesterday.
Yes.
And then ultimately, I think what myself and my chairman, the president, is here for is to really talk about what we believe the mandate of the sitting really is, and that is social justice and nation building,
Yes.
reconciliation, and the issue of transformation in cricket. And we hope we'll also have that opportunity, time permitting, obviously.
Yes. No, that would be a great contribution to the effort that we are seized with.
Thank you so much, Mr. Adrian. Mr. Nash Digambo was first to testify and followed by Mr. Tsukumuluku.
Thank you, Advocate Dumisa. So in terms of Mr. Ntsebeza, I think I also did put in writing a response to his testimony.
Yes.
I do not have a lot that I refuted, bar one correction pertaining to what he submitted in front of you, Chair, and that had to do with the allegation of the forensic report and the disciplinary hearing of the CEO who testified yesterday. And the correction is that the disciplinary happened not as a result of the Fundutsi report, but as a result of an internal audit report by our internal auditors, Tick and Mend, and there is currently still a CCMA matter going on about that. For the most part, I think, other than that, Mr. Ntshebeza's testimony, I don't have too much to refute there.
Yes.
And no specific allegation was made against me by Mr. Ntshebeza.
Yes.
There's a particular allegation that he did make against the union, so I'm not sure if you would respond to the allegations against the union in general or only allegations pertaining to you as an individual.
I am more than happy to assist the SJN with allegations against the union as well. I do have quite a broad portfolio that I was given by the previous president, Mr. Peter Vonia, in that I serve on more structures than I probably would like to. But I was called on to serve, and that's exactly what I do. So governance, labor relations, procurement, assisting with social and ethics, and on FinCom are all structures that Mr. Peter Vonia has elected me onto, and I'm currently still serving on all, if not most, of those structures. So I'm more than happy to answer the allegation about the union that Mr. Ntsebeza made and make a contribution.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah, there is a document I believe you have prepared, dated the 18th of October 2021, in which you purport to respond to Mr. Siopa, and I don't know if you don't want to take us through that document for the record, so that you know what we have by way of your statement is also part of the record, and is not just an annexure or something that you prepared for me as a response to, as I see it here, particularly Mr. Siopa's submission.
I'm comfortable to do that.
Yes.
If you'd like me to first deal with Mr. Siopa's submissions, I'm happy to do that. I just thought that I think from my side, Mr. Moloko and Mr. Ntsebeza would not take that much time.
Oh yeah,
and I'll probably spend more time.
You are free to
spend more time on this.
Yes.
I thought Advocate Dumisa would had a specific question for me from Mr. Ntsebeza regarding the union, and I'm willing to try and answer that to the best of my ability.
No problem. It's also I don't know if you had sight of obviously you would have had sight of the email, so I'll just read it out. It was part of Mr. Ntshebeza's submission. In his submission, he stated that a quick overview of ECU. We are a small union that has been run like a spaza shop for many years, to the detriment of the people and region it represents, namely Ekurhuleni. After many years of discord, disunity, and infighting, we now seem to have settled on a board that shares the visions of our members' council and hopefully represents our needs and vision. For the past 5 to 7 years, this union has regressed disproportionately, thereby rendering service, quality of opportunity and representation of black players and players of color to almost a zero, thereby rendering cricket a non-viable option for most people it supposedly represents and whom it should benefit the most.
Yes.
So that was one of the complaints that have been highlighted even yesterday as well. So it's just something that we would like you to address, please.
Absolutely, and like I previously stated, I think that's exactly the mandate, I believe, of the SJN, to look into things like that instead of these personal spets, but we'll also deal with the personal spets. So I have to agree with Mr. Ntsebeza, and just to give a little bit of background, that the previous speakers, two of the previous speakers, and I'm saying this with a lot of respect to them, does not have all the background about where we're coming from. I think myself, Mr. Forbes, Mr. Moaki, and even Mr. Ntsebeza have served the structures for far much longer than the two previous gentlemen, but not to minute their contributions in any way. So this is exactly why we ended up at the first Nwepa report. So the previous dispensations, the previous boards, paid a lot of lip service to development, to the tune that even if funds were raised in the name of cricket development and previously disadvantaged communities, the money just would never reach the supposed beneficiaries. So Mr. Ntsebeza is 100% correct in that, and I think the first Nwepa report also deals with it, because it was a very lengthy and thorough process which also took place here in this office, and we were here for almost a week, and it was very thorough. So indeed, service delivery and cricket development in Ekurhuleni has not been given the attention that it should have. Again, like I was said, even if funds were allocated specifically for cricket development, and that's why we started initially negotiations with the previous board. And when I say the previous board, this process actually started as early as 2013, 2014, and that's when our late president now, Mr. Annie O'Connor, may God rest his soul in peace, decided to actually try and give emerging clubs, or previously disadvantaged clubs, a little bit of input, if you like, and he established what is now chaired by Mr. Maloko, a Emerging Club Facilities Committee. We had numerous meetings in 2013, 2014, 2015, and by 2016, we realized, as the Emerging Clubs and Emerging Club Forum, it was initially under Mr. Tato Moaki as the director of Emerging Clubs, and then subsequently under Mr. Peter Vonya as the chairperson of Emerging Clubs. We then realized that, you know what, it's still been 3 years of lip service. And then we started engaging the powers that be at the time again. And then we were instructed by them to actually follow a grievance process and declare a dispute with the union if we want to be taken seriously. And we duly did that. We declared the dispute, and we ended up at the Nwepa report. The Nwepa report is self-explanatory. The Nwepa report, I think, most important finding, in my view, is that previously disadvantaged clubs and individuals and areas were isolated and left behind in Eastern Cricket Union, and going forward there should be constant consultation and engagement with them until, for lack of a better phrase, the playing fields are almost level. So we were very excited with the outcome of the first Nwepa report. And Mr. Forbes, then myself, Mr. Moaki, under Mr. Vonya's presidency, formed what Mr. Vonya deemed the Pride of the Rose Committee that will ensure that we give effect to the Ncwepe findings. To our dismay, again, it took all but a year, even though the Ncwepe report was adopted by both the board and Members' Council. It took all but a year for us to really start the implementation of said findings and recommendations.
Can I just understand why this has been a trend? Because I've been asked several times in some of the interviews that I've heard, and the question has been put bluntly to me by interviewers. Ntsebeza, what do you think you're going to do better than what Nicholson did, Ncwepe did? And is this thing of yours not going to end up like just another talk shop? And it worries me, Mr. Lansberg, because one doesn't get into projects simply because there's something to be done there. I would love to be able to say I came, I heard, I made recommendations, and I can look to an outcome. What is it that the unions themselves can do in order to support a fair outcome by way of recommendations? If I say, for instance, having had everything, I may not have had a lot of time. And I had indicated to CSA that, if this were left to me, 18 months to 24 months would be a proper and appropriate time within which to fully inquire into gender and race-based discrimination to the extent that it exists since 30 years ago, from 1991 to 2021. It's a long period for cricket having committed itself to union, doing away with white structures, Indian structures, African structures, colored structures. Let's come and be unified. Very lofty aims and objectives. So it just worries me that we are going to be looking perhaps a year or so after SJN, and we're going to say, but then, was it worth it? And how can unions assist in the implementation process of whatever recommendations have been accepted by the unions? Because I think I take pride in the work that I want to do, and I am encouraged when I have people like you who have got a historical background of what has been done and what needs to be done. So I just wanted you to understand that it worries me even as I proceed with these hearings, because at the end of the day, you have got a lot of things to do. You shouldn't look back to today and say, hey man, I went there and I told that guy what the history of this entire cricketing, this entire sport, what it has gone through, what we recommended, what predecessors to him, Mwepe, Nicholson, and whoever else.
Langa, you're forgetting Langa.
Yes. and we're back to square one. Anyway, I felt that I needed you to know that.
Absolutely.
That it worries me every single moment from the time I undertook to do this job.
Absolutely, Chair, and I've been following you, and this keeps on coming up from you, and I'm glad you noted it as a concern, because the reality is humanity. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah.
Until human beings don't acknowledge that we are not doing right by one another,
Yeah.
we are anti-transformation, we are anti-change, then we're going to keep on taking 3 steps forward and 10 back. And on that note, with Mr. Ntsebeza submission, he commended the current board and the current structures when he said it was looking as if we were heading in the right direction. The reality is, not long after that submission, Eastern's Cricket finds themselves again at some type of discourse and not being on the same wavelength pertaining to transformation.
Yes.
And inclusion. I want to try and provide a couple of solutions, which you can take under consideration,
Yes.
and where the government and especially local government can play a huge part. I think the issue of facilities comes up a lot,
Yes.
and I think where we could have maybe lost the trick is, we are all from the same municipal areas in terms of different races. Coloreds, Indians, whites, and black Africans would, for instance, fall under a Benoni municipality. Maybe if we start sharing the current facilities in these locations that are very much close to where we are, and like Mrs. Yopa said yesterday, that we don't have to take 2, 3, 4, 10 taxis and drive past facilities which can be shared by both non-white people and white people. That could be a possible solution. And hopefully by that way, we find one another when we see each other every day and we know what each other's plights are. Because I think, like you say, since 1991, I think it's sad that a lot of our colleagues in the advantaged areas still does not know the real plight in a previously disadvantaged community. They still don't know the real plight of a boy that is being raised by his grandmother, and why is he acting the way he's acting? Why is he ill-disciplined? Why is he frustrated? Why is he angry? And it's sad that in 2021, we are still having these conversations when we call this the beautiful gentleman's game. I think there's a lot more for us to do when it comes to that. And your other suggestion that you normally make, I absolutely love it. I think the majority of our board will support it, that there should be an ombuds office for a foreseeable a time period that CSA should allow, because if you're just going to drop a 100-page recommendation on us again, it's going to be adopted, but it's never going to be implemented.
Yeah.
And we will head to another Langa, Mwepe, or Ntsebeza from the other unions and ourselves, unless we are really going to do, with the help of CSA, proper oversight for the implementation of whatever your recommendations are going to be. But I'm going to again stress, we have to become more humane with one another and be pro-transformation and pro-change. Otherwise, we're going to go around in circles. I'm going to move on with your permission.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Mr. Moloko submitted that I said to him in a members' council meeting that he should not ask us about facilities, but instead he should tell the members and the stakeholders about the facilities project. I did say that, and I meant that sincerely when I said it to him, because he is the chairman. I'm assisting him from the board side, but ultimately he is supposed to drive it. So this is how it happens in our union. We've got what we call operational staff. We are more ceremonial and oversight directors. We are not executive directors in cricket. We volunteers in cricket. So we've got our day jobs, and then we've got operational staff, which is basically being looked after by Cricket South Africa. And they report to Cricket South Africa for the most part. So we're trying to assist as volunteers through our expertise in construction or labor relations or marketing and sales or whatever it is that we're good at and what our day jobs are. So both Mr. Moloko and Mr. Siopa was correct in saying that I assisted with the needs analysis in every single location in Ekurhuleni with my own time, my own money, my own effort to give the union a report that says what the needs were in every single previously disadvantaged area in Ekurhuleni. But after that, the process had to be driven by the CEO, the operational staff, and we would just do oversight. So it was a misrepresentation yesterday by Mr. Siopa saying that myself and Mr. Moaki were responsible for delivering that service. Mr. Moaki is actually a big boss at Lindsay Saker Motors, and I run my own businesses, so we cannot be running. And in fact, CSA is very anti directors getting involved in the operations because they are basically guiding our operational staff about how they want them to guide. So there was a lot of misrepresentations made in that, on that front yesterday. So yes, indeed, I did say that to Mr. Moloko. The other correction that I need to make that Mr. Moloko and Mr. Siopa made yesterday is to just give you the differentiation between the lotto funds and the 2 million rand that needed to be spent. So when we went to the first NWEPA report, it was because of pressure being asserted by the then Emerging Club Forum and the Emerging Club chairperson that you've raised funds in the name of lotto that was supposed to have been spent on development. And then after we asserted some pressure, you also said you will top it up with an additional 2 million rand. So that's when we went through the entire first NWEPA report. So when we then came onto the board, we've just realized that under the recent and new president, Mr. Peter Vonia, the union has just withdrew funds to the tune of 4 million, which was the first time in the history of the union that it happened. The maximum before that the union withdrew from its reserves was, and I'm talking under correction, in the region of 2 million rand to assist with operations and stuff. And when we got to the board, over 4 million rand was withdrawn. And we then said, guys, should we not relook whether we can spend the 2 million rand immediately, because this is now a new phenomenon to us. And but the lotto money definitely has to be spent, and we started spending the lotto money through phases. But because of changes on the board and the operations, we finished phase 1, and we've now just recently started with the other phases of the lotto funds. So no money disappeared. money was deferred to try and get the union on a balanced footing again financially, because we believe it would have been detrimental to the union if we'd gone and spent both the lotto money and the 2 million rand that was set aside. So that money is still going to be spent for development, and I'm going to have to agree with Mr. Siopa again and Mr. Maloka that that's only going to scratch the surface, unless the suggestion of white and non-white clubs starting to share facilities in the municipal areas. It means that we're going to have to build ovals to clubs like the biggest black area in Ekurhuleni, known as Tembisa, black, and they don't even have an oval. Davidton doesn't even have an oval. Vosloorus not even have an oval. So the reality is I don't even think that government is going to be able to assist us in that. So we're going to have to find innovative ways of how we find one another and share these facilities, and don't have a us and them attitude, don't have an attitude of not wanting to share. If we really all there for cricket, we should start embracing. We should really start to adopt, even if you like, clubs that are in worse off positions, and that's the only way that this game is going to grow, in my opinion.
Mr. Lansberg, is it true that the union continues to spend more of the funding in the white clubs or more affluent clubs than it does in the previously disadvantaged, with the previously disadvantaged clubs or emerging cricket clubs?
Yes, that is true, but I think the question we have to ask is why is that happening? So, and maybe through CSA and the unions, they need to start having a conversation about it, because how it's happening is that clubs with bigger facilities, more teams, and more expenditures, if you like, are assisted a little bit more. And to be honest, that the traditional white clubs does make the union's job a little bit easier if they do have 3 grounds, because we can then schedule some of the even previously disadvantaged and non-white teams at these grounds as well. And that's the reason why they get a little bit more assistance. And that's the only reason, and that's the only way they get, and the only place where they get additional assistance. So the short answer is yes, but there is method in the madness, and that should be investigated more, and see why that is happening.
And what is the union's then current plan? Because I mean, as you understand, and as it was already stated in the submissions we heard yesterday and in July, that and obviously in the WEPA report, where it does state that the black or the emerging cricket clubs continue to be sidelined. So the more the union spends money on clubs that already have the facilities, it obviously disadvantages the emerging cricket clubs. So what's the union's plan? Because that affects transformation. So what's the union's plan for the emerging cricket clubs?
Well, I'm going to give you the good news. The good news is that the current board, like I stated previously, is that we believe that the most fundamental and important recommendation that Judge Bernard Nwepa made was constant consultation and not sidelining of the emerging clubs going forward. So we got very worried when the previous president, Mr. Vonya, decided to actually do away with the emerging club portfolio, because that just didn't make sense to us. If the most important and fundamental recommendation is that there should be more inclusion, why would we remove the most important portfolio? So the good news is that the current board has actually started to implement the WEPA recommendations without fear nor favor. And needless to say, it's not going down very well. Hence, I said earlier that the statement that Mr. De Gemba made previously, that all is looking well, all of a sudden is not looking all that well anymore, because we are actually enforcing and implementing the Ngwepa report. So our plan, in short, is that the Ngwepa report will be implemented for as long as we are there. Obviously, we don't know how long we're going to be there. And we will make sure that we give effect to the Ngwepa report and try to close the gap. I'm going to again say that it is not going to be an easy feat. Hence, I'm trying to come up with alternatives in saying that the municipalities and the government and provincial government and even national government should find ways on how we can get clubs to start sharing facilities, because trying to build facilities in previously disadvantaged areas is going to be almost impossible. Capacity, both financially and otherwise from the government side, is not going to happen. Definitely not in the next 10 years.
Yes, if I may just interject there, Ombuds, I don't know if you agree with that position, that as opposed to the union building facilities in Tembisa, and people in Tembisa have facilities within their own area, that that there should rather be shared facilities.
Yeah, well, wouldn't that be speaking to resources? I mean, if it is possible to have a facility in Tembisa, that is the most ideal thing, because it would avoid a situation like what we heard yesterday, somebody having to take 101 taxis before they reach the end point of where they want to get to in order to just get practice. That's the one scenario. The other scenario, of course, is that probably as a build-up to adequacy, then those who have must share with those who don't have, so that even if the end game is to say, Tembisa, you now are resourced to the extent that you ought to be over time, which is why I thought, the permanent office of the ombudsperson is necessary in this transition period. It has taken 30 years for us to find, hey man, look, we haven't really achieved much. But going forward, perhaps that might be the solution. So I understand you, Advocate Ngele. It seems to me it should not be an either-or. It should be, how do we get to an ideal position? How do we get somebody from Bondiva, from Langa, from Nyanga, to be self-sufficient? But then you don't want to have that white elephant that they built in Kailicha. Beautiful resource, but it gets vandalized because there is no purpose that informs the building. It's just building a structure so that we can point, okay, but you people from Kailicha, why do you want to come to Weinberg and all those, yes, Claremont and all those places, when, we built for you a facility. Things must be done with people, not for the people. It seems to me that...
Yes, so I think, yes, that will then say we've got a short, medium and long-term plan.
Exactly.
So, and that would actually then cause a boy from Tembisa to only take one taxi, 15 or 20 minutes from Tembisa to Kempton Park, instead of having to change a taxi in Kempton Park, then make his way to Benoni taxi rank, and then still have to take a walk from Benoni taxi rank to get to Willowmore Park. So again, what the union is doing is making sure that we first deal with practice facilities so that we do not have the situation. And again, I think Mr. Siopa was a bit subjective yesterday. So the boys really are not traveling during school days and weekdays to Willowmore Park for training. Training facilities is what we're dealing with now in phase 1, to make sure that we build the training facilities as close as possible to where the people live. But the ovals, the grounds where matches are being played, is what I'm saying neither provincial, municipal, or the unions have got financial capacity at the moment to make that a short-term reality. And we have to find other avenues and ideas to make that happen in the immediate and short term.
And Lotto can give only so much.
Lotto only gives so much, and that's the reality. And we all know CSA's current financial position is also, we can't even call on them to start building ovals, because they're dealing with 15 affiliates, and how they're gonna build for 15 affiliates in every year. I hope I've answered the question, Advocate Dumisa. So the union is trying. But I think there's much more that we can do in the short term. And again, I'm going to repeat, only if we become more humane and understanding of each other's positions, understanding of where the world are, especially understanding of where the world is now after COVID, and how that has even made a further impact on a lot of people's lives. And I think that's where it starts.
Okay, and then Mr. Lansberg, I want to understand, where is the resistance from the union coming from, the resistance from investing and spending more with the emerging cricket clubs?
It's really a position of do we have to spend at the moment, because the union finds itself in a conundrum, and the current board, in that they've inherited a lot of what we believe is mistakes that was made by our predecessors. For instance, the one big thing that my president is fighting currently at the CSA Members Council is the funds that we currently have. Do we spend it on development and transformation, or do we repay a loan that we're owing to CSA? We can either do one or the other. We must be honest to say we can't do both. We're sitting with about 17 million rand in our reserves, and we're owing CSA exactly that amount of money. So because of decisions that was made, and the plans just never materialized, that money was supposed to be generated through these loans, through content, and it's just not happening. So to be honest, at the moment, the union just have no money. It's not that they are resistant, but the little bit that we do have and the little bit that we do save, rest assured that this current board, intends to spend it mostly in previously disadvantaged areas and without fear nor favor. And needless to say, there is a little bit of resistance there. From our counterparts, but we just keep on calling on the Ngwepa report and its recommendations as our guidelines.
You were doing the exercise of, and I think some of the answers have come, but you were going through this email that Dikamba sent in May. As a submission to me. I don't know if you have, Ms. Lansberg, whether you have had sight of this email that was sent to us and by Nesh Dikamba.
I did share.
Yes.
That'll be a couple of weeks ago. Okay. So if you can refresh my memory, I'm happy to answer.
Yes. Do you propose to go through this email and get some responses, or?
No, Mr. Lansberg has responded
Yes.
to most of the submissions by Nash. I think the only part that we would just like you to just clarify would be from Muluku's testimony, which is the graphs that he or would you be doing that, Mr. Moaki?
Sorry, Mr. Lansberg would be doing that on our behalf. It's off.
Oh, it's
My mic
off.
is off.
No, we want your.
Yeah, I think, Chair, you fear that either the president or the current director of club cricket would deal with that.
Okay.
So with your permission, I don't want to take up too much of their time.
Yes.
And I think I am. If I can quickly deal with some of the submissions of yesterday, unless there is still questions.
Okay.
Questions
No.
on Mr. Moloko and Mr. Digambe.
No.
Okay, so Chair, through you, again, I'm going to go through this. I'm going to try not to read it all and try to just speak of the because I wrote this last night, straight after Mr. Siopa's submissions, and I'm more than happy. And Advocate Dumisa was going to check with you whether I actually
Can
commission this before I leave, and submit it as a statement under oath.
Yes.
So I think my first observation I want to make about yesterday's submissions is that a lot of things were said which was based on what I think you guys as the legal experts would term hearsay. I mean, Mr. Siopa spoke about matters that happened in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, of which he was not a member of the union, nor was he privy to how these processes unfold. And I think Mr. Siopa should be requested from yourselves to provide proof and evidence of the submissions he made yesterday, because otherwise it will be deemed hearsay. Mr. Siopa has been a member of this union for less than a year, and he even spoke about things that has happened in the last 3 to 4 months in the union, which we don't understand how he could be expected to speak on these things if he's no longer a member of the union. And again, that can only be based on hearsay from Mr. Siopa. On that note, I'm going to quickly deal with a couple of his, and I think I've dealt with a lot of it to my response with Mr. Moloko as well. So firstly, on the CEO application and appointment, Mr. Siopa tried to portray that I was bitten, I had an axe to grind with him, hence I was doing my job so thoroughly, because that's exactly what I was doing. As the governance director and the director of labor relations, I believe it's my job to ensure that the MOI, the Labor Relations Act, the Companies Act is followed to the letter. And again, people can provide proof if I've done anything to the contrary over the years. I'm prepared to answer to that. So what happened, and my gripe with the union at the time of the CEO application had nothing to do with Mr. Siopa. I didn't know Mr. Siopa. I only met Mr. Siopa, as he said yesterday, when he was introduced to the Members' Council and the board. So my gripe I had with the CEO application process was that the entire Members' Council, and Mr. Forbes was part of it at the time, had a fundamental problem with the acting CEO at the time, and we did not believe he was the best person for the job. But needless to say, both him and myself had submitted our applications for the job. The incoming president at the time, Mr. Vonia, promised the union, and we almost reached an agreement, that for the sake of unity and moving forward the union, we should not look at someone from within the union. But then we found out through the Members' Council that Mr. Vonia was did not shortlist me, but he shortlisted the acting CEO. And that's when I wrote a letter to the union and said I feel discriminated against. So it had absolutely nothing to do with Mr. Siopa. I didn't know him. I did not even know who the rest of the candidates were. The only two candidates I know at the time was myself and the other person who was also a member of the union. So I just wanted to clarify that. On the issue of the terms of reference of the facilities committee, I think I've dealt with that. I've dealt with that in detail. But there's just one thing I need to clarify is that the chairperson of the facilities committee, of the emerging facilities committee, is not the chairperson of emerging clubs. The chairperson of emerging clubs is actually a director seconded by the board to look after the portfolio of emerging clubs. And the chairperson of the emerging facilities committee is actually a member of the members' council. Of the members' council. So I think that's the only other issue I needed to clarify.
Yes.
And then obviously the terms of reference on how it came about. I think Mr. Siopa spoke on hearsay, and these processes all happened as early back as 2013, and I don't think he was qualified to speak on it, and I think he misled the board. I'm going to run through this very quickly with your permission, another 5 minutes, if you will.
Yes.
The deployment of Mr. Tsotsoso is another issue that Mr. Siopa touched on yesterday. So I acknowledge that initially that the board agreed for Mr. Tota Tsotsoso to assist the board in looking into why we were leaking money at the time and why board members were overriding what we found out during the second inquiry, spending of the union's money when there was no, and interfering with the operations. So when Mr. Tsotsoso presented his report to the board, we realized that he was actually contravening our MOI at the time, which states that an independent director, and we were very aligned with CSA's MOI at the time, as an independent director should under no circumstances be a significant supplier or service provider to the union, nor should this person be involved in any day-to-day activities and cricket matters, especially within the operations. And when Mr. Tsotsoso decided to advise the board that people needs to be fired, people who was there for 20 odd years, who knew 10 times more than all of us, it raised a red flag to us, and we wanted to just investigate. And we then said, we think that we've erred in the appointment of Mr. Tsotsoso. He got paid a handsome sum of money without proper board approval by Mr. Siopa. And we then, through the help of CSA, said that we accept that we have contravened the MOI and CS MOI in the appointment, but it was mostly to look into financial mismanagement, but it was never for him to come and recommend firing of staff and financial managers and HR managers and cricket services managers. Yeah, the MOI was followed to the letter, and when we did contravene, we tried to take corrective actions, but it obviously did not go off well with some of our members who are now calling us a cabal. But again, it is what it is. He touched on the second WEPA report. Again, I'm going to acknowledge that Judge Nwepe did mention a technicality in the way we called the meeting and the way we tried to remove the people that contravened the MOI, the Companies Act, and members' councils' directives. And we actually challenged it and said, we agree, but that does not mean that the actual charges should not be answered. We actually mentioned it to the then interim board as well that was appointed by the minister when we said they need to please provide an opportunity for these charges to be answered. Needless to say that the then president resigned, and it still boggles our minds that if Judge Nwepe recommended in your favor and found in your favor, why did you resign instead of opting to let us delve into the contraventions of the MOI and the Companies Act and the financial mismanagement at the union under the time with Mr. Siopa as the CEO? Mr. Siopa is currently, as we're speaking, attending a CCMA directive in which he tried to portray the fact that I chaired his disciplinary hearing. That's what he said yesterday. So I just need to refute that in the strongest of terms. See, Eastern Cricket has an independent labor company that deals with all its labor matters, and they actually dealt with it 100% in terms of the Labor Relations Act. And the people who actually confirmed the misconduct charges against Mr. Siopa was the internal auditors, whom he again suggested that I appointed and I knew. And again, I'm going to refute that in the strongest of terms. I didn't even know a company like that existed until I got quotations from 4 auditing companies, and we had to appoint the one with the best proposal for the union. And I state categorically now that we followed the procurement policy to the letter. Mr. Siopa was part of that procurement policy, and I still don't know any of the members of Tick and Mend who is currently our internal auditors. I've only dealt with them once, and that's when they gave evidence against Mr. Siopa regarding the internal audit report. Mr. Siopa then also claimed that I am involved in almost everything that's going wrong at the union. I want to state that the president that appointed Mr. Siopa as the CEO actually also appointed me on all of these portfolios. And unfortunately, if I have to deal with my portfolios, I try to do it to the best of my ability without fear or favor, and actually risking myself to become a very unpopular person, of which I am today at Eastern Cricket Union. But it comes with the territory, Brady. It comes with the territory. So I'm gonna refute in the strongest terms the issues of the auditing firm, the issues of policies and procedures, and issues like that. I think I don't wanna be too long anymore, because I want my 2 colleagues to also have a say.
Yes.
The last thing I'm going to say is that, unfortunately, Mr. Siopa also mentioned something that I think neither him nor myself are qualified on answering, and it was the issue of selection of players. I think we should leave that to the coaches. I think I've always left that to the coaches, and him trying to insinuate that I have or is interfering in selection matters, I would like for him to come and prove it in writing, and hopefully with a permanent ombudsman, they will have an opportunity to come and interview the staff, the operational staff, the coaching staff, and all stakeholders at Eastern Cricket Union to confirm whether that is indeed the case. I think I need to do justice also to the other people's names that Mr. Siopa mentioned yesterday, like Mr. Godfrey.
My apologies, Mr. Lansberg. Just to interject, yesterday Mr. Siopa stated that the union doesn't have a playing affairs committee. Is that true?
At present, yes it is, and let me just explain what happened. So when we went into professional cricket, we all unions had to embark on interviews and stuff like that. And because we do not have a CEO, and we opened up all of these interviews, the board, and I would like Mr. Moaki and Mr. Forbes to deny or confirm what I'm saying is correct. With the absence of a CEO, the board has asked me, and the operational staff has requested me to assist from a labor relations point of view with the interviews of players and with the interviews of both teams, which I duly did, which I declared to both the board and to the members' council, and there's minutes that will members' council minutes that would actually show that. So the short answer is there is not a fully constituted playing affairs committee at the moment. Cricket only started 2 weeks ago, if you like. So I know that the current director is in the process of sorting that out. I have now fully recused myself of it because I've got a son who's playing cricket. So has countless of other board members and members' council members in all unions nationally, because cricket is a volunteer business, if you like, where parents volunteer, and it goes without saying that parents would be involved and become administrators as it does in any other sport. So the short answer is no, but the other short answer is the league has only started now, and this is normally the time, straight after the league has started, where pipeline committees and selection committees are being formed. So
there's no team that is chosen yet?
It is, but it's strictly done by the operational staff with the current director, and I had no involvement in selecting teams, and that can be confirmed with the coaching staff and the operational staff. I was going to say that I just need to also mention a couple of other people's names that Mr. Siopa mentioned yesterday. He mentioned in particular Mr. Godfrey Shlengani, who he believed that he only got the job because his brother only got the job because he is a director. The reality is that Mr. Shlengani's brother was employed before he became a director. So Mr. Godfrey Shlengani only became a director, I think, less than 2 months ago, and his brother is now in the union's employ for almost 4 months. He also made hearsay statements about our interview processes that has gone on. Again, hopefully when the permanent ombuds is there, we will make available all recordings to all our businesses that went on within the interviewing processes, negotiations with players, board minutes meetings, and members' council minute meetings, where all of these things were dealt with in detail. Because, Brady, if there's one thing that I've learned, is that minutes and recordings don't lie. And I think I'm going to leave it at that, with your permission.
My apologies, Chair. I just want to go to your statement isn't numbered, but it would be the so it would be the third last page, yes, where you speak on the allegations about your son. So if you could just read that out for the record. I refute from that. I refute in the strongest terms. 1, 2, 3. Yes.
Yes. I refute in the strongest terms the suggestion that I have interfered or influenced any selection where my son was concerned, and suggest he provides written proof to all these allegations. As he is not part of the union for almost a year, and he was provided with malicious misinformation.
So the allegations of misconduct against your son are not true?
Absolutely not.
No problem. We will request for written proof.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, we, according to the schedule, we are only left with 15 minutes. But not even 15, it's 13 minutes, 1-3. And I also want to take a body break of about 3 minutes. What I propose to do, and I want the two of you to decide between yourselves, is to allow us to take your testimony up to 11:45 or 12 o'clock. And then, so between the two of you, you can focus and zoom into areas which you think ought to be highlighted. Given that Mr. Lansberg has actually given us a lot of food for thought. And fortunately, it was within your earshot. You know what he has missed or what you would like emphasized. And I think that is the approach that we should adopt. We are at 11:18. Can we take a 5-minute body break adjournment? And then we come back after 5 minutes, which will be at 23, let's say 25 past 11. And then we'll run between the two of you until 12 o'clock. We are adjourning for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, no, so you're welcome.
It might be quicker than that.
Yes, thank you very much for allowing me to take a little bit of break. I believe that we're going to hear you now, Mr. Moaki. You have already been sworn in. You know what the drill is. You need merely to...
Sorry, Prati. I think the order was that Mr. Forbes would come in and then I'll come at the end.
I don't see Mr. Forbes.
Just to actually sum up everything.
Okay, all right.
But if Mr. Forbes is obviously not present, we can therefore go ahead.
I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Forbes, you know the drill. You have been here for most of the time that, or all of the time that your colleague was testifying. And without further ado, go for it. What do you want to tell me about Eastern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity. Yes, I think Mr. Lansberg has covered most, but with my portfolio being good, I'd like to just set the record straight in terms of Mr. Maloka's statement with regards to not being aware of where the funding goes per club in terms of what we deem as grants. The club is very out there with that. Each club on a monthly, on twice a year, gets a statement from the union with regard to what grant was paid and how much. I think he was quite adamant as to he didn't know where the money was and didn't know how much he got. It's very clear in terms of club cricket as to how the money is allocated, how you get it, and how it's achieved. A statement is said to each club at the end of in December and again at the end of the season. So that is all on record, and it's sent out from operations every year. With regards to the club grants, the question was asked in terms of are white clubs getting more money? I don't think it's a matter of white clubs and money. I think it's for facilities and trying to assist. And every club is very grateful for any sort of money that they might get from the union. And we need to understand that I think barring maybe 2 grounds within Easterns, our grounds are owned by municipalities, by Ekweleni. For me to go and play at Ekweleni, I need to, some have leases, some on a monthly basis, some do it on a seasonal basis. I go to the council, I pay to use that ground, and we pay a lot of money. So any help that we get from the union is justified. It is expensive. It by no ways is superseded by the amount of help given by the union, the state that our councils are in. And I have been to most of the grounds, and there is no help from the municipalities. They don't have money. They don't have resources. These grounds are held together by beg, borrow, and steal from what are clubs that are desperately trying to just put kids on the ground and players on the field to play cricket. It's an expensive exercise. Any assistance, and if for 1 minute anybody thinks that there is money going to white clubs, they are disillusioned. It's going to facilities to put black, white, yellow, green, and purple onto those fields to play cricket. And that's our objective from a club point, is to get players onto the field. Mr. Chair, for myself, I've come from a player to having a son that played, to coaching, to administration, to now being on the board. So I think I've earned my stripes to be where I am today, sitting on the board. I've been through boards, promises. I've been through, you name it. I've done it all. I've seen it all. I've been there. I've done it. And for the first time, and by Mr. De Gamba's own admission, it looks like the board has got some sort of direction. You're always going to get some sort of resistance from somebody. But unfortunately, as Adrian Lansberg says, we are a little bit unpopular. I've always been one that has asked questions, and I've never been one to just sit back and wait for things to happen. Mr. Vanya chose to never answer any of my questions, and still today, he owes a lot of answers to the union on how he left the state that he left it in. I'm going to finish off with saying our mother body CSA. Every year, our poor operations team get tasked with a needs analysis. Go and do a needs analysis and find out what's wrong with cricket and its facilities. I remember, I think 2 or 3 years ago, I had somebody from CSA accompany me, and we went to the grounds in Eastons, current grounds that were operational. And by their own admittance, they were like, how do you guys make this playable? And we do this massive analysis and we do this massive report. We put it all together. And I'm afraid to say, I've yet to receive anything. We've yet to hear anything. We've yet to receive anything. However, every year we send this awesome needs analysis to CSA, and it's just lip service. They don't intend ever helping us. We're pretty much in it on our own. So it's something that maybe they need to look into. And so I think something that you need to look into is, it's all fair and well we're doing needs analysis, but are you going to institute change or not? Just be honest. With government, to build stadiums, it's not going to happen. If we can put money into what we currently have, it would help. But I think people need to look deep into what their intentions are against what they actually want to achieve. And you mentioned all the reports. This is probably just another report in terms of needs analysis, which I'm sure they get every year from all around the country. And I don't know if there's any change. There's certainly no change at Eastern's Cricket, that I can assure. So I just want to say, from a facilities point of view, it's always going to be a challenge, whether it be government, whether it be facilities that we can help. We have a huge challenge ahead of us. And yes, I do think that we need to put it out to, we try to share. We've tried to say to those that don't have grants, come and use us. For some reason, there's a resistance. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's money. I don't know what it is. But we have the facilities. But boy, do we beg, borrow, and steal. It's something we need to look in very, very, very urgently.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Please just help us understand. You're saying that the allocation of grants is based on the clubs that have facilities. Is that correct? So you would basically allocate...
No, grants are given to every single club. It's based on number of fields you have, number of teams you have. There's no criteria. So if you don't have... Some clubs have 4 fields that they have to maintain. Very expensive. So they come up with a formula within the union, which has been in the union for a while now. So you get graded. But depending on the number of teams you have entered, the number of teams you have to facilitate and you have to maintain, that formula is put in place and you paid accordingly. And there's a number. You even get paid for attending meetings, for argument's sake. So if you come to all the AGMs, there's money paid to you to get there. So there's a whole formula in place in terms of paying. So it's not a facilities. Every single team gets a grant, but there is just a yardstick in place in terms of the payment.
No problem. Thanks for clarifying that. So that would mean that white clubs end up getting more money or more, the funding would be more due to the fact or due to the state of their facilities and the fact that they might.
I wouldn't say it's a white club. I'd say that facility, if it has 4 fields, it gets the money to it. If it happens to be it's not a white club. It's a club within the union.
But Mr. Forbes, the reality is that the affluent clubs are getting more money from the union. I mean, I don't know if you dispute that.
The affluent, well, they've got fields, so they will have more fields, yes.
Right. So I just, now, my issue...
And more teams for that matter, sorry.
Sorry?
And they would have more teams, sorry, they'd have more fields and more teams.
Right. My issue then would be, doesn't that system perpetuate inequality? Because obviously the disadvantaged areas who probably need more of the funding because they don't have the facilities, that means that according to the system that is used by the union, that money doesn't go to the disadvantaged areas because they don't have facilities. So if I could just rephrase my question then, or my statement rather, is that my issue is that that system perpetuates inequality and lack of transformation because those who have get more of the funding from the union. Is that not the case, Mr. Forbes?
You are right. You are correct, because they don't have facilities. They haven't been paid for their teams, for attending meetings and all the other criteria. The major criteria would be number of fields. So you are right in terms of, but having said that, our biggest club in the union probably gets, and I don't know, 20,000 Rand for the year. Now, if we for 1 minute think that 20,000 Rand is going to maintain 4 or 5 fields, we have blinkers on. But you are right. It's not helping transformation or helping get a facility in where somebody doesn't have. You are correct. That's a different type of funding model completely that needs to be allocated, and it needs to come from a higher power. Because to build an oval, and if government don't stick together with CSA and don't build a cricket oval and don't build a soccer and build a sports complex, only then are we going to start winning this in facilities into big places, because you need a sports complex. You can't put a swimming pool there and a cricket oval there and a rugby pitch there. You've got to create a sports complex.
And then how does this relate to the 2 million Rand funding that Mr. Siopo was referring to, and that Mr. Moluko also was referring to, that the union had, in terms of the Ngwepe report, had set aside 2 million Rand to assist emerging cricket clubs?
Well, if you, Mr. Lansberg was quite clear that the 2 million Rand was money that was put aside by previous president on looking at the financial stability of whether that should happen or not. The decision was made that we cannot afford that. I don't know where they dreamt up. I wasn't part of it at the time. We came up with the 2 million. We have 2 million Rand to spend. The union doesn't have 2 million Rand to spend. We don't have money. And they made a wise financial call to hold on to that, because we would put this company into more financial dire straits.
And then just lastly, from my side, I just want to understand your views then with the emerging cricket clubs. What will the board and the union in general do to assist emerging cricket clubs with facilities, since you're stating that there isn't enough funding right now for that?
So I think Easterns is unique in what it does is that it has an extra 3 fields associated to Willamore Park, which it gives to all the emerging clubs. So their home ground is Willamore Park, of which we have 3 fields that they use, and they don't pay for, and it's maintained and it's kept for them. So they've got the advantage of having a home ground, but it's at Willamore Park. So how we can help with practice facilities, but in terms of building ovals, that's going to be a very expensive exercise. But as it stands today, all the emerging clubs have a home ground in Willamore Park.
Mr. Bruce Forbes, is Easterns committed to transformation and development?
Very much so. And lip service is one thing, action is another. It's always going to be a long road. And I think we've heard it on this SJN process right from the word go, that it is a battle. We'll definitely win it, but we've got to fight to it. And I've always been one that's fought for cricket. I've never fought for people or clubs or whatever. I want cricket to win. And we all have to buy into it. White, yellow, purple, green. If we don't buy into this way forward, it's never going to work. But to force it is not going to work. It will find a natural progression if we do it properly. But forcing it upon people and saying you must do this and you have to incorporate that is going to be a very tough challenge ahead.
So who then in the Eastern's Cricket Union is resisting transformation? Where are the power struggles?
I think the power struggle is amongst probably the internal chairmans. There's a lot of egos involved. There's have-nots in terms of some do have ground, some don't. There's a lot of I mean, I'm not part of the emerging clubs forum. We're not privy to those conversations. They meet a lot, they talk a lot, they have a lot of good ideas, but unfortunately that comes at a price, and you need money. And at the end of the day, we can all come up with fantastic ideas, and we can build grounds, and we can come up with ideas, but without the money and without the funding, we will never win this battle.
You know, I've been looking at a slide here. I don't know whether it is possible to project it onto the screen. It's, I don't know if it emanates from Chugulu Humluku.
Yes.
And it shows what purports to be a cricket facility for Tembisa Cricket Club. I don't know if you are able to see that facility. It's picture from
I have seen these pictures, yeah.
Yeah. Now, it's October 2018, and the question I ask is, and I asked the question, and I ask it of myself, because the brief that I have is to show or to investigate whether gender and race discrimination has any impact that it has had on cricketing, on cricket as a sporting code. And when I look at that, and I say to myself, is it possible or imaginable that that is the kind of facility that you would have for white kids or white people? What would your reaction be? And why would you react by saying, if you said yes, that's also the kind of cricketing facility that we have for white people? Or if you say no, that is not how cricketing facilities for white people are. It's not the kind of facility you would expect for white people. And then the question that I would further ask is, why is this so? Tembisa in 2018. Yes.
There's no excuse to have facilities in those conditions. And we should be sad that it's in that condition. Having said that, I do know that it is a very big part of the new board is to get the cricket facility, practicing facilities like that back on track. It has been built, was part of the Lotto project. So that is one picture, and I'm not proud. It's not a proud moment. We've got many a white club, sir, where they have facilities that are worse than that. We had a club that's been abolished over the pandemic. We've got clubs that don't have practice facilities all over the union. I hate to refer to them as black or white. I refer to them as cricketing facilities. And we're
Except
not proud
that if the reality is that they are for black people, let's call things by their names. And that is why I want to know if that is a cricketing club facility in Tembisa. Is it a reflection of what the cricketing club facilities are across the board? You have correctly answered me to say this is not a picture that anyone should be proud of. And I therefore, part of what I hope to get from you is, how do you envisage a situation where we have got facilities that are ideal facilities for playing this beautiful game of cricket across the board? What do you think needs to be done? You have, I think in some of your answers you said money, we must throw money at this thing. Is it only money that must be thrown at it, or is it something more?
It boils down to money then. We need to prepare them. We need to make sure that they are up to speed. It also takes a responsibility from the club to take ownership. One of our biggest challenges is providing all of these, and then there's no ownership, and it's left, and it's not reported that something went wrong or whatever, and we find out a month later or 2 months later. So those are our challenges, but we now have those structures in place in terms of coaches that go out to these places and they report venues that are not up to speed and all those sort of things. So that's all been put in place now. So the bottom line is it's going to revert to money. And I know we have some money in place, and one of our big objectives is facilities. And it has to start with the practice facilities.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes, I have no more questions to put to you. I think we all should appreciate that now that this project has been authorized by Cricket South Africa to look into gender and race discrimination, but the aim being to get to a stage where the game of cricket has taken its pride of place in South Africa, in South Africa's sport environment, where it has done actively and consciously everything that can possibly be done to make sure that race and gender have nothing to do with how this sporting code progresses to be reflective of the demography of the country in terms of race and gender. Just like the legal profession and the judiciary in this country, at the turn of things to the present democratic dispensation, it's amazing that one looks back and says, by the way, in 1994, there were about 168 judges. Only 3 were black, an Indian and 2 Africans, black Africans. And only 2 were female, 2. And the rest of the judiciary afterward all voted on the 27th of April 1994. If you looked around, you would find that out of a judiciary of 168 people, all of them were white and all of them were male, other than the 2 females, both of them white, who were judges. One was in the appellate division, as it then was known. One was a judge in the Western Cape. And the 3 other black judges, Mohammed, Madala, and another judge who actually had been in Swaziland and came and became a judge here. Otherwise, the entire judiciary at the turn of our democracy was white and male. So the moment this country became conscious of who were dispensing justice through the highest courts in the land, and how, in terms of race and gender, they were a problem as a judiciary. Something became exceptionally urgent to be done. So I think we need to be as conscious as the legal fraternity was in addressing the issue of dispensing justice in the country. And I'm quite happy to hear from you that holding a position of importance as you do in cricket, you are disturbed when you see that picture that pretends to be a facility. That picture is an eyesore. It should never be an indication of how this country, through its structures, would pretend they have provided facilities for black people. This is an eyesore. But let's hope the SJN project will see the eradication of those structures or an improvement of training facilities for all South Africans, black or white, male or female, young and old. Thank you, sir, for giving us the insight that you have brought through your own experience in cricket. This is a beautiful game. And South Africa deserves to be where they are, leading the world one day, but playing as well as they are on their current tour. That is as it should be. And that is as it should be if the team that we have sent abroad is a team that has our support because it is the best team, but also it is reflective of who we are as a country. But those are just thoughts that have been triggered or that have been instigated by the input of the two of you who have given testimonies today. And I don't want to detain you any longer because there's a man here who is saying, when am I going to speak? Thank you very much. I cannot thank you enough for having provoked these responses. But you are excused, and let us hear him now, who has been sitting here to say that you are welcome to stay as you have done so when your predecessor witness was saying so, was testifying. So let us hear you.
Thank you, Buddy. Thank you, Advocate Dumisa. So my name has been mentioned quite a few times
Yes.
here at the obviously this hearing. So in introduction, this is Ditato Moaki. I can proudly say the founder of the struggle of fighting for the people of color in the East End. The man that the organization had taken through a process and spent close to $500,000 in trying to get rid of. In essence, with me having said all of that, in this bundle that I have here, this is Eastern Cricket Union. And I continuously add all the information and any form of wrongdoing or anything that is probably discriminatory or marginalizing of any other race by any other human being or all the race groups within our union. As a president of Eastern Cricket Union, I stand to want to unite the union. But like Mr. Forbes had obviously said, together with Mr. Lansberg, there has been some form of resistance. There is. Generally, there are people that think they are much more entitled, that think that they're much more superior, that think that their voice matters over everyone else's, that think that they know better. That will obviously go on for the longest of time, will question issues not based on whether these issues are legitimate issues, but based on who's probably saying these issues. Prior to us actually even having been to the inquiry with Judge Bernard Ngwepe, there were communication and there was email trails that were continuously sent to the previous board, myself included, because I was the leader in sending those emails. There was one question that was openly asked to actually my colleagues from the traditional clubs to say, do you see any form of wrongdoing that is probably happening in this place? And we asked to say, guys, please form part of the struggle so that we can be able to change this union. And unfortunately, they refused. But today, in a union that never had policies or processes, people think that they're entitled when you're saying we're setting up these policies, and this is how this union is going to move on going forward in the near future. People demand and they want to dictate as to how and when must happen. They want to make their own terms. But quite the contrary, these are the people that did not even have anything to say about any form of wrongdoing. So this unfortunately comes with the territory again, you know. But I do not actually want to delve much more deeper with regards to Eastern Cricket Union. At this present moment, we are a new board. My wish is to obviously unite them again, even with the indifferences, even when thinking that they're actually better or probably no better than the current board. But we'll look at obviously trying to see that we can have a united union. Mr. Lansberg, together with Mr. Forbes, have shared a lot. I want to just touch on an issue with regards to Mr. Siopa.
Mr. Siopa, I see he has raised a lot of controversy.
Chair,
You all want to go for him. Huh?
I wanna address the issue so far as Mr. Siopa. And I want to say it today that wrong is wrong. Whether it be done by a black person, a white person, an Indian person. And likewise, those constituencies, they must not defend wrong if it's done by one of their own. Okay. So Mr. Siopa went on to actually delve and tell you about his appointment process and how independent it was yesterday.
Yes.
Yes. And how he got introduced to Mr. Tabang Morwe by then President Mr. Vonya, and then he happened to have known Mr. Morwe already because he was acquainted that met somewhere in the sporting environment. That is definitely not the truth, but probably the opposite. Let me first take you through a panel that actually appointed Mr. Siopa, and that very same sitting that said that the interviews happened here. This is where all the collusion and the corruption started. So Mr. Siopa, in that panel there was a colleague of mine, Mr. Debo Khosiko, Mr. Siki Wadvala, Mr. Peter Vonya, the lady called by the name of Chantel Moon. Okay. Now, when that process was done, it's factual that he knew Mr. Debo Khosiko. He knew Mr. Siki Wadvala. Mr. Vonya, testifying at our CCMA case, goes on to say, yes, I have met Mr. Siopa before the interview process. In fact, I was introduced to him by Mr. Jack Madiseng. There are transcripts to that effect. So that alone to say that I have been employed as an independent process is a total lie. And as we stand today, we're discussing the issue of the 2 million. His parking shot here was that give the black people their money, which is the 2 million. When he got employed, we were told that this man, within 6 months, he will bring in what he has already taken out of Eastern Cricket Union. That never happened. That never happened. We had a Cricket South Africa World Cup under 19, he called it under 20, that the projected income was supposed to be 500,000. He went over to spend 300,000 into our reserves. So the loss was 800,000. Having not even met his mandate within that 6 months to say that he would bring X amount of money into the union. So I just want to actually ask for a proper investigation because, certain people would come here and waste this forum's time and talk about issues and want to paint not a clear picture to the general public about what's happening in the East End. It is people like that that are actually affecting the progress of development of cricket, because the more you steal from the people that do not have, the grass will suffer, and that's grassroots cricket. The future will suffer. So people must not come into such forums and speak about their issues and tell you, yes, how bad it was, when they are not actually even informed about what has actually transpired. And they're continuously doing the wrong stuff. So that should not happen. That should be condemned. So the corruption in line with the employment of Mr. Siopa, I urge and I plead with anyone to actually come and investigate that. And I think, to actually have an employee as Mr. Siopa, when you're asking for a reference check, he goes on to tell, with all my previous employers, I've signed a non-disclosure agreement. What type of an employee? So you've got no track record. What is your track record like? To be employed as the #1 employee in any other company. That goes on to show that you're actually incompetent as a person. The fraud that has happened within how he actually, even the CV, the way it was drafted, from the very same Ticketman forensic report, goes on to prove all of that. So people of color should not come here and say, this is how people of color are being deemed, or how are they being treated and all of that. Whereas they are the ones that are actually even doing the wrong stuff. We must keep each other honest. And it's unfortunate he's an embarrassment to black administrators and future CEOs. I'd like to leave it at that, Chair. If ever there is any questions, you can pose them to me. I'm more than willing to answer all of your questions.
Well, I certainly do not have any questions. I can only thank all three of you, Mr. Lansberg, Mr. Forbes, and you, Mr. Moaki, for having taken the trouble and the time to come and give us food for thought. And as I have said, even when Mr. Lansberg was testifying, I am quite desirous that something concrete must come out of this process. And I will emphasize that with the board. When we write our final report, that should be one of the themes that we should address. because it is not something that comes from us. It comes from people who are able to say there was a Langa, there was a Mwepe, there was a Nicholson. And all of them were addressing more or less the same issue. Ntsebeza, what do you think you are going to bring which is going to be new and different, or which will achieve the results that were suggested long before you came into the scene by others? Judge Mwepe, Judge Nicholson, Judge Langa, very reputable legal minds. We can't do the same thing over and over again and still hope to get a different result. It just doesn't make sense. And therefore, to get people like you, Mr. Moaki, because what you are saying here is, this is our future, the future of our children. And as a sporting code, it should be accessible to my children as much as it is accessible to Mr. Forbes' children, as much as it will be accessible to all of us, irrespective of our races or our gender or our belief systems. Then we will talk about a game about which we are all proud. So I cannot thank your contributions enough, even though I get worried. But we will find a way. Where there is a way, a will, there is a way. And you're coming even to be physically here, not via these platforms, even though they function. But your coming here is an indication of your commitment to finding a solution that is going to work. And I can tell you, I will take your inputs today into account. And as you have seen, I've got a lieutenant here in Advocate Dumisa, who seems to be cutting to the chase and saying, but what about this and what about that? I couldn't have done it without him. But the responsibility lies with us now, after we've had everybody. And there's still a long schedule for this year, for this week and for next week. But thank you very much for having come.
Thank you, Chair. Can we thank you on behalf of Eastern's Cricket and just again emphasize that we hope that CSA will give utmost consideration to a permanent office. We believe it's needed. We believe there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think there's one question that my president forgot to mention. He was supposed to deal with it, and I think Advocate Dumisa asked the question, where is resistance coming from? And I think we dealt a lot with facilities, but we didn't necessarily deal with the human side of it in players. And I need to put it on record for when you guys come or when the permanent office is there, is that there seems to be a trend in Easterns that only selection of non-white players are questioned. And what makes it worse is that those selections are questioned by our white counterparts and not even our own coaches and chair people, whatever, who knows our boys best. From Duduza to Tembisa, from Tokoza to Davidton, and everywhere. So I just felt I had to put that on record. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. You are welcome, sir. We are adjourned. I believe there will be a lunch that will be served before we resume with our schedule to hear Mpumalanga Cricket Union at 2 o'clock. We are adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.